Hello, hello, hello. Hope all is well. My name is Jania Massey. I'm with JSM Consulting now. And this is what month is this? September installment of NPO University Crew, where we talk about all things nonprofit. It is a free monthly training that we want to do for you to just kind of give you some insights and some background about anything that's nonprofit. So today I'm super excited because the topic is corporate sponsorship, and we have my good friend, my good Judy, Anovia Bedford, because everybody keep calling her Bradford. Anovia Bedford. She is going to be joining us today, and we're going to talk about all things sponsorship. So I hope you guys are ready. I hope you have some questions. She's probably going to drop a ton of jewels because she tells me so much stuff without me even asking questions. She's just a wealth of knowledge, and I'm so blessed to know her. So I'm going to bring Anovia on. Hey, Anovia.
Thank you for your kind words, making a girl feel special on a Wednesday evening.
Daddy, you always telling me something, so I'll be like, what? What happened now?
In our matching colors.
Yes, oh, we do.
That money green.
So one thing about Anovia is that I would consider her the jack of all trades. Anytime I ask Anovia something, she's like, oh yeah, just do this, this, and this. You know, at one point she made jewelry. You guys may know her as being the co-founder of Black Tech. Hey, Nate, being a co-founder of Black Tech. She is a mother. That is Nate in the background. She also is the founder of Vet Deck, which is all about pitch decks, corporate sponsorships, and just she got so much good stuff going on. It's just whatever. So it's not what
sound like I need to sit still.
Right. It's so much. So I'm super glad you said yes to joining me today on the show and just answering some questions. So
for sure.
Please excuse me, y'all. Like, I feel like I sound crazy. I just got Invisalign, so I feel like I'm trying to make this thing work, but I feel like I'm talking really crazy right now. So just bear with me. But Anovia, everybody that starts the show, we do a quick game of this or that.
Okay.
Sometimes it might be business, sometimes it might be personal, but you have to tell me which one you like, okay? So, do you prefer the North or the South?
Oh, why are you going to do that to me?
If y'all don't know, Anovia's from up top. She's from New York.
Yeah.
Straight up in town.
Ooh. So I want to say both. I prefer the South for living and quality of life and raising a child and driving to the grocery store in your car and getting in and out. And the proximity to clearer water. Nathaniel, you got to stop yelling. But I prefer the North because it's home. But if I had to choose, I would choose the South.
Really?
I said it. Yeah, I would.
Really? Okay. Do you prefer being a founder, CEO, or working for someone?
So when I work for someone, I don't last too long. And I can't really quit on myself. So right. I'm going to say founder, CEO.
But what if you became like the chief marketing or branding or corporate sponsor for a company? Would you do that, or would you want to remain running Vet Deck?
So it would have to be real specific terms. Like I like running Vet Deck because I can work on so many different things. Like I'm not, super stagnant. It's like we have fishing trips and yoga, but then also conferences. Mm-hmm. So that kind of level of surprise is exciting. Now, CMO salaries are also exciting. So it would have to be the right fit. And I'd have to be able to be there for a long time. But at some point in time, I feel like I'm always going to do my own thing. Yeah, like it's in my blood. I started my first business when I was like 4. So.
Okay. So do you prefer being a jewelry designer or being a corporate sponsorship guru? That's why the game is called this or that.
I'm gonna say I prefer being a founder.
Okay. All right. And the last one. Do you prefer going out to eat or cooking?
Oh man. Because I be feeling like it's this and that.
It's this and that, not this or that.
I know why you asked me this.
You do.
Yeah, Jania be like texting me like, I feel like you're cooking some lamb out of nowhere. I'm gonna say I prefer to go out to eat.
Okay, prefer to go out to eat.
Prefer to go out to eat.
So this is gonna be a good conversation because we're friends. So if y'all get some randomness from us, just go.
Go with it.
One reason why I want to ask you on the show, not just because you are an expert in this topic, but it is something that is really hard for nonprofits, especially if you're a grassroots organization. And I just feel like we need some type of help or just some type of guidance in how to really secure it. Because a lot of times when you have your bucket of financial revenues for your nonprofit, some people kind of put corporate sponsorships and grants together and they're totally separate, right? But both of them do require having some form of relationship with whoever is the grantor, and maybe a relationship with whoever is a part of the corporate sponsorship. So my first question for this evening is, how can nonprofits be seen by corporate sponsors, especially when they're starting out?
That's a really good question. So I feel like skin in the game is always the most important thing. Like if you're looking for corporate sponsorship, they're going to ask you what you've already done and if you've been collecting data. So I think that always start at building those relationships, because like you said, even for the grant cycle, I don't think people realize how much relationship goes into grants, right? Because it's like, yeah, that grant is coming out, but usually like 8 times out of 10, they know who they're giving that money to already, and they're going to invite you to apply. And it's the same with corporate sponsorship. So first you have to figure out if you're going to go the nonprofit, I only want to collect money that, collect sponsorship that can be 501c3, because then you'll be dealing with a different part of the company. So you might be dealing with an agency that handles the philanthropic endeavors. But if you have a business or company that is ready for marketing sponsorship, that's a whole different ballgame, because sponsorship generally is a marketing line item. So that means you have a program that you know that they can come into that's not on the philanthropic side. I hope I'm not confusing everyone, but it'll make sense the more I talk. But building those relationships first. So I always tell people, like, make a list of the companies that you use, the brands that you love, and the places that you already have some kind of tie into. Like if you've been buying Tropicana for the last 20 years, you've spent some money with Tropicana, right? You know their product well. When a new flavor drops, you know you're going to get it. So think about it in terms of who do I already support, and then come up with a plan on how they should support you. So if you haven't thought that far, just don't go blasting out a whole bunch of cold emails like, hi, I'm this person, and yada, yada, yada. Make sure you at least mentally have some kind of strategy behind who you're going to talk to and how you're going to build those relationships. And also ask your friends, because friends have people that work at all kinds of companies. Your friends work at companies that can potentially sponsor you. So, I mean, if you ask your friends and they tell you no, then that means they don't trust you, and I don't trust you neither.
I will say, piggybacking, because I'm always jotting down notes. The collecting data is important, not just for corporate sponsors, but it's important in general. Like even when you write a grant, you have to report back what your data is. How are you serving? Who are you serving? What does that impact look? So grants and corporate sponsors want both things. And I also want to say about the building relationships part, like how much of your brand is a part of building that relationship? Because a lot of people are just like, oh, let me get to the person that makes the decision. But then it's also like, well, what are you doing in the community? Like, how are you serving? Like, what is your reputation like? Why would I want my name to be on your whatever you're trying to get me to sponsor?
And sometimes when you get to that decision maker, people can fumble the bag that way because they get to that decision maker way too early. And you don't even know what you want or what you need or what you have to offer. So now It's like, if it's an organic relationship, like my best relationships have been with marketers that have moved from one company to the next. and we've just grown natural friendships. But if you're coming at it more from a business aspect, you don't want to accidentally, I fumble bags that way myself, by speaking to a decision maker too soon before you formulated your plan or had some kind of roadmap to what you want to do. So.
Right. So just real quick, I didn't say any housekeeping issues in the beginning. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat. I'm pretty sure some of you guys are watching from Facebook and Instagram. It is streaming live on both platforms. So please put your question in the chat so we can get Anovia to answer that. So with that being said, my next question is, what are tips for nonprofit organizations who are starting to look for corporate sponsors but serve at a smaller capacity? So they don't serve that many. They don't have that many numbers. Like they might be just serving maybe 60 people a year, but they have a really dope event that they need sponsored. So what is your advice for them to start out? And can they even get a corporate sponsor?
So I'm big on the data and the numbers, but that's when you use storytelling to your advantage, right? So if you have 60, what did those 60 people do? What does that relationship with you look like? And how have you impacted them? And how have you impacted your community through those 60 people? So depending on what it is, if it's a one-off event, I kind of shy away from one-off events unless they're really large for sponsorship, because for smaller organizations, I think that sustainability always becomes an issue. So I like to see things strung together to lengthen it, right? So maybe you turn that one thing into an event series. Maybe you turn it into something annual. So at least when you can approach sponsors, it's not just, well, we serve 60 people. It becomes, we have an event every month with 60 people. So that gives you 60 points of access. 600 points of access to those people, which is different, because that after like 7 or 8 times of interacting with a brand, then you become really interested and you'll probably buy it or purchase it or share with your friends, right? So I think that if you don't have large numbers, then you have to get real creative with storytelling. We've had events that have had 12 people, like yoga retreats, that have received sponsorship. So if you serve, 60 people, 100 people, don't shy away from that. Just make your numbers into an impactful story.
So do you think that, would you recommend that some nonprofits where they start getting into corporate sponsorship?
Hold on one second.
You seen her turn mama mode. She is turning into mama mode. You back?
Y'all mamas know. It's a long day and I'm tired, and he's gonna test me until bedtime. So we're gonna pull through. Okay. You said, do I think that they should wait for corporate sponsorship?
Yeah, and I'm asking that because I feel like some people, they get the 501c3 and they're like, oh, I'm gonna get a corporate sponsor, I'm gonna get grants. And it's kind of like, you gotta grow into that. You know what I'm saying? Like, you may get individual donors, but you're not going to get that first grant unless you kind of been vetting and talking to people and putting it out there, or already have been serving in some capacity. But you're not necessarily going to get it the first time. You know what I'm saying? So,
and so I can talk about.
I started looking into corporate sponsorships until. Hell, I still be struggling with corporate sponsorship if I'm gonna keep it real. Like, I reached out to people, but I'm more on the grant side, but I want to get more into corporate sponsorship. So I don't know if I'm making sense. Melanie is laughing.
No. So
mom as well, so she's laughing because she probably knows exactly how it is.
Girl. But I think that now's a good time to talk about like what the sponsorship cycle is. So depending on what you're asking from brands, the size of the check plays a role into how long it takes. So for events, event organizers, grassroots organizations, anyone that's in year 1 to 3, that's like your relationship building time. It can be done quicker, but that's when you may have an event and you invite the sponsors that you want to work with out to that first event and say, this is what we're doing. Send them the recap after. This is what happened at the event. Like, we hope you enjoyed yourself. Would love to work with you in the future, and like really nurture that relationship, because it can take anywhere up to 18 months to secure a sponsorship deal, depending on the size. So typically, I like to say you should reach out to sponsors 3 to 6 months before your event. When I work in-house as a marketer, when I get anything that's less than 3 months, to me, that's a favor. Anything less than 2 months is definitely a favor, because what you're asking me by presenting an event in 2 months away, when my calendar is scheduled a year out, is to make room for you in this fold, right? So now we're coming on a very important time of the year. September is when brands are usually thinking about their next year. So the deals that we did this year from February until April, we started talking to brands June of 2019 about them. So that's how long it can take. So now for September, budgets are going in. So if they don't know you by now, if you don't know you by now, right, they'll never know you. So so now it's kind of late to start connecting, but honestly, anytime you can use anytime as a good time. But so now they're working out their budget for next year. Typically, say you have a $5 million budget, right? That's a marketing budget that I've had. And the way that it was broken down was $3 million was already earmarked for things, right? So we would have our recurring deals that were 3 year, 5 years, 7 years. We would have like stadium deals, which are the bigger ones. So we could be doing a $1 million a year stadium deal for the next 7 years. We know we can't touch that million. Then, another million might go to this, another million might go to this. So that $2 million in my budget that was left was like, okay, we have our radio, our advertising, all that stuff that we know we always do. That wiggled away another million. Social media, all that stuff. So we might have $1 million to play with, which is not a lot when you think about the size of some things that we need to sponsor. So when I'm working down and on marketing teams, there's always something in the back of your head that you want. There was a software that I wanted to buy so bad. I was like, once we have extra room in the budget, I'm buying that software, right? So it's like there are all these other things that come into play with those marketing dollars. You have to get assets. You got to, every other year, you got to buy new tents, new stuff, whatever it is. So if you have a $5 million budget, you may only have $500,000 to play with. And that can go like that when you have to do a year worth of anything, right? So I've earmarked all that money. So now let's say I have $500,000 and I'm getting 100 decks a week. That's heavy competition. People are asking for 50,000. People are asking for 250. So if something comes along, like something like a substantial, like an opportunity to sponsor South by Southwest, or like, a concert or something at 250, and we're like, okay, we should do that. That only gives us 250 for the remainder of the year. So that's what, a little bit more than $20,000 a month. That's not a lot.
Right.
That's not a lot at all. If you're giving 4 events $5,000, that's it. So you're only going to be able to sponsor 40 things a year. So getting on marketers' radar, that's why it's so important, because that budget, we're working on it now. By December, it's locked and loaded. So we might have some extra money at the end of the year, which is good for nonprofits, because usually you can let it slide. Like I get text messages from some people that are like, hey, do you know any nonprofits? I got 20 grand that I need to dump before the end of this year. And that's when I'm like, let me hit Jania. Let me hit this one. Let me hit that one. Let me, try and make something happen, because they have to spend that money sometimes or they won't get it again the next year. So
as you were talking, it's one where people don't realize this is a nonprofit, but whatever. I know why, but you're going to laugh at the one I'm going to say. But I feel like they do corporate sponsorship well. And I'm talking about Broccoli Fest. So a lot of people don't realize that Broccoli Fest is actually a nonprofit. And it's talking about environmental issues. It's not talking about smoking, like some people think. It's not talking about smoking. It's talking about
Broccoli Fest is no.
Yeah. So people fail to realize that actually during the week of Broccoli Fest, there is a conference. Like they have sponsors. There's a conference. There's goodie bags, swag bags, giveaways. There's Toyota. And then you have the actual sponsors for the actual festival where the artists are. A lot of people go to the artist part of it. They don't go to the week-long events that's in DC that's really good, to bring awareness. So with that being said, I did want to bring up how can you convince corporate sponsors to give you money over product?
So for Broccoli Fest, I've loved their growth. I think they're about 10 years old now. And like, that's not how it started. Like, it's very interesting. But once you start working with corporate sponsors, your events can change shape and it can start turning into something else based on what their needs are. Right. So they could have reached out to a sponsor and then like, oh, okay, well, we're interested in doing this. And now that becomes an element. Well, we're actually interested in sponsoring a conference. So now you have a conference, you know? So once you start getting those relationships and seeing what they want, it really can change the shape of what you're doing, what your event is, and what your programming looks like. What was the second part of the question?
How do you convince people for products over
money? So I think that I think that in kind, which is when you get products, should be used as a good entry point for some things. And depending on what it is you need, in kind can work fine. I always talk about beverage and snack companies because they're really easy to get in kind product from. I'm a beverage girl. That's my background. I work for a ton of beverage companies. And one thing about snacks and beverages is that there's always going to be a new flavor or something, and there's always going to be a new product. So usually if you do want product, that's a good point. But also when there are new flavors and there are new products, there's always a budget that comes along with that. So like, for instance, there was a conference here that we helped do sponsorship for, and we were launching new flavors. We're launching flavors, so I know that you have a certain amount of budget. So I'm going to ask you for it, right? But if it's your first time, you can take the in-kind as an entry point, and then you can't be in year 3 still taking product only. I'm going to say that again. You cannot be in year 3 still taking product only from the same brand, because then they've gotten used to it. They know we can just give them product and they're going to pay. We can give them product. At some point in time, you got to put that pressure in and convert them. And I mean, not to say guilt trip them, but listen, we have put your product in over 1,000 people's hands, and you can do math. You can look up marketing formulas and find out what the ROI of that could be and say, so we potentially made you X, Y, and Z dollars. Give my money. I want my money back, right? It's time to cash out. So a lot of times brands get comfortable like, oh, we'll just give them this. We'll just give them this product. And working on the marketing side, if y'all know me, y'all know me. I real talk. For the majority of Black events, they're always going to try and push product for multiple years on you. They're not going to try and give you money. Like, you really have to fight and prove worth to say, okay, now give me $5,000. Okay, now give me $10,000. Okay, now I want 50, and build the relationship kind of that way. But if they can only give you product, they will only give you product forever. So we've helped clients convert by asking the brand more of what they want. Because another thing is that usually if you approach a brand and they're like, oh, well, we'll just give you, 1,000. I remember I literally, like, maybe 13, 14 years ago, I had 2,000 bags of pop chips in my house. Every time somebody came to my house, they would leave with a box. I'm like, you got to get these out my house. Like, the brand had first started and they had small budget, but they wanted to make a big impact, and they would just like bombard people with product. But
now I will say I have been successful with getting in-kind donations from corporate sponsors like Publix. Well, I received a gift card from Publix. So Publix, Snodlands, I received like chips, so I kind of use it like snacks for the kid in my program, or like create snack packs or whatever, but I have not been successful with getting an actual check. But you said something that triggered a thought. So a lot of times when I see corporate sponsors, like I see a lot of major ones like with Create and Cultivate. So it might be Toyota that did something, or sometimes I would see it for a Black Girl Rock, but then it also look more so like, because it was on TV, maybe that's how they got the corporate sponsors. Not saying that it's not a strong brand, but I would see more of the corporate sponsors from that angle. And then, of course, like Afrotech. But in your opinion, do you think now, because what's going on with society, that Black organizations are getting more chances at getting corporate sponsorship to meet a quota? or is it organic? Okay, never mind. You answered it with your face.
I definitely think so. And I think that we should take advantage. Also, outside of what's going on, just from COVID and not being able to sponsor huge events, like before I mentioned sponsoring stadium events, if you can't sponsor that anymore, the money has to go someplace else. So last year was a good year for those pivots of people are like, I'm like, yo, try and get this money from here. AARP randomly, like their target market is us. So they're looking at that like 35 to 45 for that early buy-in. So they were tossing money at like so many things. I was like, that's AARP? Like, what y'all doing here? But companies like that normally wouldn't are getting into the game.
Right. Interesting. Okay. So what are some beginner tips for securing sponsorships? Lord, for securing corporate sponsorships. Y'all, if y'all missed my intro, I have Invisalign now, and I'm trying to get used to talking, and I know I sound crazy.
You're doing a good job, though.
So, what are beginner tips for securing corporate sponsors?
Yes, collect your data. We have a crash course coming up, so follow us on Vet Deck because we go from everything from your research to building a deck to pitching to recapping during your programming after, and then there's a bonus case study section. So yeah, go follow Vet Deck. It's going to be really, really good. Like you'll leave with a one sheet, a deck, a list of contacts to reach out to and all that good stuff. But one of the things that I tell my clients is to not sneakily connect data, but collect data on the type of brands that you want to work with. For instance, I have a client who's, it's a travel client. And since, travel, we don't know what's going to happen in the next year or so. She's starting to have more land events where they're not going to be traveling. And I think that it would be a good fit for several different types of companies. So like say it's a car company, right? I'm like, do you know how many people are looking to buy new cars in your network? And she's like, no. I'm like, go on Instagram and do a poll. Hey, y'all, anybody looking for a new car? And you can collect data so simply based on who follows you that way. You can put it in your newsletter. Like a lot of the data that we collect for alcohol company is I always ask the same questions. Would you buy this for yourself? Would you buy this as a gift? Would you order this as a bar at a bar? And do you have a bar in your home? With those 4 questions, I can tell a creative story and pull some really good data. So start using your social media to collect data outside of what you do for your clients and what that looks like. Collect data about them, right? Do you have kids? Are you in this age range? Are you a homeowner? And having that data will lead to different opportunities. So my number 1 is always collect data. Number 2, have an internal deck for yourself, right? If you're like, if I could have my dream sponsor, this is what I would offer them, and create a list of assets. So your assets are what you're offering them. You can have small assets like logo on everything, which honestly brands don't really care about. Your logo on stuff is worth 0.1 cent. So you can have a line item like standard logo package and in parentheses, put on my baby's forehead, on the invitation, on the napkins and all that stuff. But are you willing to give them a photo booth? Are you willing to give them naming rights? Like, do you want the carpet to be covered in their logo? Whatever those assets are, make a stock asset list so you can just pick on all the things you're comfortable with. Because the worst thing is to pitch to a sponsor and they ask you for something that you're not comfortable with doing. So you want to mentally be prepared for that and say, here's the things to choose from. Don't reach super high. So like you were saying, like the Toyotas, the Googles, for whatever reason, that's who everyone wants to sponsor their events, right? Everybody wants Walmart, Target, Toyota, like all the big companies. That's a lot of red tape. I honestly prefer to work with smaller companies that might be in that 20 million to 50 million range that I can get a 10, 15, 25,000, $100,000 check from and only have to talk to one person because it's a much smaller company, right? If there's 40 people in the company, chances are who you're talking to is going to be the decision maker. If there's 3,000 people in the company, chances are it's going to be a long time. Working with Walmart, it can take up to 6 months for Walmart to get you a check. That's how after the event. So I tell people all the time, like, y'all think y'all want it, but you don't. Hennessy, 6 months. There are a lot of companies that you'd be surprised at how long and how much red tape. So I say more local focus, smaller, unless you're working on a huge project where you need to like reach masses. I would much rather do a list of 20 companies in a 100-mile radius than, go for the top. So be more realistic with that. Also be realistic about what your event or program is worth. Everybody wants $250,000, Jania. Everybody. Their first sponsorship deal, they're like, $250,000. And I'm like, no. Right? So whatever your goal is, if you're not a realistic person, I say cut that in half. And if you come up with that in sponsorship, it's good. If you're a realistic person, then you might say, okay, this is probably worth $50,000. Our calculator will be launching soon. I'm still working through some things with Crystal, our lawyer. You'll be able to go and answer a series of questions, and it'll populate how much your event or program is worth, which I think is really important, especially in this sense, because you don't want to leave money on the table, and you also don't want to overshoot. So I think that those are my top things.
Okay. So collecting
data. Is that too many?
Internal deck. I would like you to kind of shed some light on what a pitch deck is, because I feel like a lot of times nonprofits not sure if they need to have a pitch deck or if they need to have an overview. And I think that's more so because when you're used to applying for grants, it's like more of like specific questions about how you're programming or what you're going to do. So you may give an overview of your mission, vision, and all that stuff. But like a pitch deck for a nonprofit, I feel like it's completely different.
100%. I think that overview is important. So on your first couple of interactions with the brand, that's when that overview comes in handy. And that's when your one sheet would come in handy. Your first email can be really simple. It can just be, hey, I saw you post this article on LinkedIn. I'd love your feedback. And then that overview is that introduction to your company. So that's what goes in there. Then we don't present decks until we've actually had a conversation with the brand, because that's when we know what they want. So we can make the prettiest deck ever and put all of our offerings of what we think in it. And it could be like, we don't want none of that. So it's good to have an internal deck, like I said, of what you would offer them, but then you don't present them with the deck until after you have a conversation with them, which I know is kind of confusing to some people. But after years of doing it and trial and error, you get much further having that conversation before you present anything than like just blind sending out decks. So in your sponsorship pitch deck, you'll have your demographic information. It's going to be a lot less of this is the amazing work that we do and a lot more of this is what we can offer you. So our demographic is this. Our demographic makes this much money. They love to buy this. This is what they need. They want to buy a house. They want to buy a car. They're parents. They have pets, all of that information. You want to put your social in there, good social numbers, bad social numbers, paint a picture, right? If you have 200 followers, but you get 30 comments on a picture, you don't say I have 200 followers. You say my, what's it called? I was going to say my talking rate because I'm tired.
Honorarium?
No, not your conversion rate, but your engagement, right? Your engagement. If out of the 200 people that follow you, 40%, that's a 25% engagement. That's higher than most. So right. Your 25% engagement of those 40 people looks better than someone with 1,000 followers that only gets 5 comments. So you want to paint that picture of your social. If you have press, please use it. I'm not going to say that I forced Jania a press report, but I did a press report for her, and she was like, these many people have looked at me. It was something crazy, like 1 million views and like a couple of million impressions. And she was like, what? And that's the kind of information. So if you've been getting good press and you have low numbers, use that press and say, yeah, I may have, 200 followers. However, 200,000 people saw me on WBTV. Like, this many people read this article. So it's super important. And we do those as well. So then you want to have, of course,
I'll stop you right there. Anovia is a nerd. So when she did that, I was like, wait, what? Like, it was just crazy that she knew that you can pull this information from press articles and things of that nature. And I was just like, you never know how many people have seen your stuff or watching you or whatever, which I don't know if that made me more recluse. Like
you were like,
it was like, oh my God, like, how they know me, but they don't know me, but it was.
You were like, how many people? Oh my God.
Yeah, it made me extremely overwhelmed. But yeah. I think that was really cool when you did that. I didn't even know that was possible. And it's amazing to know data in that way, because again, when I think of data from a nonprofit perspective, it's like, who am I serving? You know what I'm saying? And like, are they getting good grades? What are their GPAs? Like things of that nature, as opposed to what are the impressions that my organization is having on the world? And those are two different things.
Yep.
But
those are two different things. And so your overview captures that, what are their GPA stuff, and your pitch deck captures what is the view that the world is having on us, because that's what brands want. They're like, oh, word, you got this. So, and then I think since I did yours, we started calculating what the ad cost is. So now we can take that and say, well, this 200,000, views, this, that equals $25,000 in press. What that does is say, now if I'm only asking you for a $10,000, sponsorship, and I get press,
right?
You already know that your ad value is going to be at least 25,000. So you're already getting 2.5 times, what you get.
Right.
So all of those numbers, you want to make them fluffy, you want to make them pretty, you want to pop those in there. And then your about us, before your about us, what your offerings are. It depends. If we have a conversation with the brand about price, then we put the price in there. If not, then we'll do a starting at kind of price and let them, whittle away. We don't want this, we don't want that. And then your closing page.
But what if you want them to sponsor like a signature event? Do you talk about your programming or what you offer? Do you specifically hone in on what you want them to sponsor in the pitch deck?
So I think, usually we'll do one page of like a year overview, right? So if you have a conference, if you have classes, all of that can go on one page, boxes, circles, however you want to lay it out, the 10 things you do, the 12 things you do. And then on that offering page is when you specify and customize it for them. So say you have like the pitch competition, right?
Right.
The SVU pitch competition. So that could be the signature event. So you can give them an overlook on one page. These are all the things that we do. And then on the offering page, we want you to sponsor this specific thing. Now, if you want to sponsor that other stuff, we could talk about that. But this is what we have in mind for you. And then give it a customized feel. Like we'll get la 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 and lulu and all the things.
Can we go back to when you said your asset / offer? So what are some offers in sponsorship do you think is just outrageous, like that people really shouldn't do?
So I'm pretty outrageous. Like, I feel like I always like to come over the top things. I'm like, we can have someone on stilts and we can put somebody in a glass bubble and like let them whittle it down from there. I think that now, of course, with COVID, restrictions are so much stricter, but we've worked on everything from asking Tesla, Samsung, and Lowe's to do a smart house where they would literally build a house, build a house for a sponsorship activation. And like we were able to do certain elements of it. It was like this tech kind of house, but depending on your relationship, you can really ask for the moon.
So what is the dopest thing you've seen as a sponsorship offer?
So there are so many. So some of the things that I like, so before I say that, let me say this. Also, when you're working with brands, you have to figure out who's going to have the creative control. So we've worked on things where we thought we've had the creative control, and then the brand has come in and been like, no. And so you have to, that also determines how long your sponsorship relationship is going to last. Cause that's a brand that like, I'm not going to say who it is because I might have to work with them again, but I probably wouldn't want to just because of that experience. Because it's like we planned this thing and then brought y'all in, and we had other sponsors and they kind of like took over. So figuring out who's going to have the creative control. Sometimes they want turnkey. They want you to figure out everything and they just want to show up. Sometimes when you think about like activations is what you're creating at the event, right? And their footprint. Sometimes as marketers, a lot of our work is data. That's why I'm a nerd, because I'm in Excel sheets all day. So when you think about activations, that's probably the only fun that I get to have all day. So I might want to be more involved. So that's a conversation definitely half of the brand. But so I'm all about creativity. So one of my favorite activations is this Sprite activation, where it was on a beach. And you know how you come out the water and like you take a shower? They wrapped all the showers with Sprite. So it looks like you were showering in Sprite.
Oh, that sounds unique.
Very unique. It's very cute. I worked on a Christmas in July one with Hallmark, where it was July in Times Square and there were people in Santa costumes giving out gifts to it was like a Hallmark in Lifetime.
Right. That sounds hot. Like
they were hot. They were hot. And they were like giving out reindeer ear. But that's, if you see Santa Claus in July in Times Square, you're going to remember that. Yeah, you're going to remember that. I like Google does some really fun stuff at CES. They have like their Google houses where you can go through and go through a whole experience. Johnny Walker does a really good job of having the House of Walker where you can go and do tastings, and it's like all kinds of different immersive experiences. So yeah, I have a lot of favorites.
Okay. So my next question is, at what financial stage should you start requesting corporate sponsorship for events? So when I say financial stage, meaning the organization. So should a nonprofit wait till they have $100,000 in their annual budget to start thinking about corporate sponsors? Or should they wait until they have $250,000? Like, should they wait till their annual budget is a certain spot for them before they start requesting corporate sponsorship?
I think it depends on capacity and the budget. So if you have, say your event is going to be $50,000 and you have the $50,000 to cover it and you're not relying on corporate sponsorship, that's when to start. If you have enough money to cover your event, then you can really start looking. If you've done one and you have some data to pull and you have some skin in the game, the worst thing is to not have the money at all and ask for sponsorship. Because if that sponsorship doesn't come through or one comes through and it's not enough to cover the whole thing, you have to cancel it. That's not a good look. And the capacity, because sponsorship, pitching for sponsorship is like a full-time job, right? So if you don't have someone on the team that can be dedicated to not only pitching but managing the relationship, because after you get it, you still got to talk to these people until the event happens. So if you're in that 3 to 6 month timeline or that 6 months to a year, that's 3 months to a year that you got to talk to these people almost every week. Yeah. So, for a small organization, that's really hard when you're running your program, you're writing grants. You're always writing a grant, you're writing grants. Like you got to report on the grant that you already won, right? You got to train your team, you got to recruit, you got to do all these things. So I feel like it's more of a capacity issue, than a budgeting issue. But then if you don't have the budget, you can't hire somebody. So it's like, the chicken or the egg situation and what you're going to do about it. But I recommend that when people start seeking sponsorship, that 1 to 3 is a good place to start and see how you or whoever is on your team manage it. Because the worst thing that can happen is that you get in, 10 people say yes, and then you have no one to manage the relationships, and then it all starts, to fall apart.
Mm-hmm. And that's where I failed. Like I was really going hard on corporate sponsorships, using a lot of what Anovia has taught me thus far. And it was like keeping up was like off the chain because I was already managing grants, staff, programming. And I was like, I can't even keep up with like the email or following up, or it was just a lot. So my next question leads into, how is VetDeck creating a solution for us nonprofits? Have you announced that? Did I expose something?
You did. Well, now to be done before the end of the month, so y'all can go and buy it.
My bad.
Well, and because it's something that that I get asked all the time. Me and Jenny have had this conversation many times. And finally, I was like, all right, let me get it into gear and kind of create something. So the specifics of it, we haven't kind of completely worked out, but it's basically a bundle where you'll get an annual report, you'll get a one sheet, you'll get a pitch deck, and what else will you get? There's something else that I can't think, and the paper's not in front of me. But it's basically a bundle of all of the things.
Isn't it
the curated list, maybe?
Isn't it a list of sponsors, or you like to
I think it's probably the curated list.
Contact information.
It's on one of these 82,000 post-its on my desk. But yeah, and it's kind of bundled together. So, and the email templates. We have really good email templates. So you get it all bundled, and it can be really copy and paste style. So there's two portions of VetDeck. So there's vetdeck.com, which is where we do our agency work. So that's where the crash course comes out of. That's where our digital products live. That's where the one-on-one sessions with me are, which are 3 hours. And I kind of like rip you to shreds, but in a really good way. I rip you to shreds and then I build you back up and send you on your way. That's where we have like our government contracts, our brand contracts is the .com. And then we have a .tech, which is the tech platform that better be launching soon or else I don't know what's going to happen. But it's AI powered. So if you do have a deck, you can upload it and it'll automatically populate the sponsorship list for you. Because for some reason, it's hard to figure out who you're going to ask for sponsorship. And like I said, everybody goes to those big ones. I want Delta Airlines and I want, the huge brands. And it kind of says, let's scale back some and get a little bit closer to you in proximity. So I'm excited about both of those things when they can launch into the world.
I'm sorry. I did not mean to world premiere.
It's fine. Now they'll just go and follow VetDeck and wait on it. They'll be like,
yes. So I mean, even though me and Anovia are talking specifically about nonprofit, Anovia does pitch decks and all that for profit. So can you share more about what VetDeck does and your whole process?
Yeah. So our digital products are awesome. Our email templates are really good. They go from cold, like if you're just talking to them, it takes you through warm. Then that call that I talked about before that you want to have before you send them the deck, it gives you a list of questions to ask on that call. Because a lot of times you get on the call, you're like, well, what do I say? What do I want to know? You could just literally pick 5 of those questions or all 20. And then it goes to hot emails, closing the deal, and negotiating. It's $24. It's mad cheap. And then we have deck templates, which we're building out some more of. Currently, right now, we're not taking on any more done for you deck clients. We're going to rework that system and then launch that back into the world at a later date because it just deck building is a thing. And that's kind of why I want people to get into the habit of building their own decks to see the amount of work that it actually takes before they get to us. But we do a lot of consulting. I mean, we get questions in our inbox that we help from previous clients. A couple of weeks ago, one of our clients, she was like, hey, this brand reached out to me. They want to sponsor something. And we went back and forth via DM. And I'm like, okay, say this. Like, what's this? What are these numbers? What are these numbers? Da-da-da-da. And she ended up doing 3 posts for $5,000.
Oh, okay. That's
one
good.
post and 2 newsletters. And the newsletters wasn't even to her entire newsletter. It was only to like segments. It was like Philadelphia and DC. So the newsletter may have 30,000 people on it. So a $5,000 check for 3 posts is like,
yeah. Yeah, but I say normally does it anyway. It's not like that's a part of their normal routine. Like they didn't do anything extra per se.
Extra. Yep, just added in. One of our nonprofit clients earlier this year, we helped them secure $65,000 in sponsorship for their vaccination events. And we did the small events, which I was like, Jania, can you host one of these events for us? So yeah, that was a really big deal, especially for a nonprofit to get that amount in corporate sponsorship in such a short time. It took us maybe 4 weeks. So
because I planned that in a week.
Right.
And I still somehow found a way to still be extra. I don't understand.
It was so cute. There was a decor person. I was like, okay.
I don't understand. I mean, maybe it's the Leo in me. That's why I'm probably not going to have a wedding because
It's the Leo in you.
I'll probably be to have somebody on stilts and ice sculptures, and it just be way too much. So
I'm in charge of the NDAs at the wedding.
oh yeah. There will be an NDA if you come to my wedding. And if you have a problem with it, you cannot come there. I mean, that kind of puts you off the list, you know?
Right. And so one of the things that about 40% of our clients come to us because they are in that in-kind only boat and they want to make the transition. So we've had clients that have worked with beauty products for like 3 years in, and they're like, I haven't received a check yet. So we help them strategize and say, okay, this is what you do. And it's led to $7,500 checks, $15,000 checks, $20,000 checks. So majority of our clients that are in that 1 to 3 year, we can usually help them negotiate anywhere between $25,000 to $50,000. Those clients that are in that like 5 years and up is when we start at the like $50,000, $75,000, $100,000 checks and the multi-year deals. Like the point for me to do this is to teach us all the Black and brown women and men how to get multi-year deals. Like my goal, I've had multi-year deals with Airbnb. I've had multi-year deals with a couple of companies. And I like to know that twice a year, I'm gonna get my check, especially for nonprofits and grassroots. Like you wanna be sustainable. So if you can get into a 3-year deal with somebody that you know every year they're gonna give you $75,000, that's gonna make a big difference, you know, over that 3 years when you're like, okay, at least I know I can have one staff member, you know, permanently beside myself that this covers and like, you know, continue to get the grants. So the goal is always multi-year. It's hard to do multi-year deals, but that is the goal. And if you can't do multi-year, at least multiple events. So 6 events, 12 events, whatever it is you want, like that budget that I said, like that 3 million earmarked, that's where you want to be. You want to be in that earmarked portion of the budget.
Got it. So drop your questions in the chat. If you have anything for Anovia, we're going to be wrapping up right at 7:30. So we have about a few more minutes.
Where the questions at?
I see your questions. You got Anovia on here, child.
How do I see?
Is there any question? What are you doing?
I'm trying to see where the video is because I'm in StreamYard by myself, so I can't see one thing.
Is there any question that you often get the most that you want to address?
See, Mel loves Christmas in July.
She does. Is there any question that you always get that you want to address?
I usually get the questions about big brands. You know, like, do you think that Target is going to sponsor me? And I'm like, how often have you seen Target sponsor events? And then they think about it. One piece of advice I will say is that to go to similar events, look at similar programming and see who's sponsoring them. Like when I was a marketing manager, that's how we rolled, right? So I was at Vitamin Water. One of my later friends was at Zyco. Another one was at Kettle Chip. There was another one. It was like a Haagen-Dazs, Barefoot Wine. There was a couple of us. And anytime we got a good event, we would be like, yo, what are you doing on this day? Do you need to whatever? And so we would all basically set up at the same events and send brand ambassadors to the same events because once we know that we can trust this event organizer, we're going to use them over and over again. And that's one of the reasons I started VetTech, Bark Fins, and then working with smaller brands and new brands, right? So a lot of the brands that we've worked with over the last 10 years, we're small and now they're Bark Fins, Pop Chips, Boxed Water, Pretzel Crisp, all of these brands that are like in all these stores now. When we worked with them, they may have been in 5 stores. They were much smaller brands than they are now. And I remember Barkton sponsored an event and it was for a travel group. And in the travel group, when I tell you people got addicted to these things, there was a whole thread of people that are just like, these are so good. Like they're still at Publix by me. And everyone was like dropping coupons and like doing all these things over these Barktons. And I took a screenshot and I sent it to them. I was like, hey, just so you know, the event was 2 months ago. People are still talking about it. Sent that to him. He sent it to his boss, had a conversation and came back. And he was like, hey, we love your work. What else are you doing that we can sponsor? Yeah. So before when I said like he gets hundreds of emails a week asking for sponsorship, but he knows that my clients are going to do what they say they're going to do. So once you have those kind of relationships with people, it'll take you so far. And that's when I was like, well, I need to do this for real. They came, a bunch of brands were coming back and they were like, what are you working on? What are you working on? I was like, how much money you got? And
money. So I don't see any questions. So that may be a good thing. You probably have covered everything in thoroughness. But I did want to just thank you for your time. Yes. Thank you for enlightening us. I have a ton of gems as far as collecting data, which you said multiple times, building relationships. I think one that's really important that people fail to forget is ask your friends. And I think people fail to forget that in general. Like a lot of times people don't even know what their friends do. And I'm like, well, are y'all friends? Like, it's weird.
They don't know what their friends do. Half my friends don't know what I do. They'd be like, oh, she does something. I got an email the other day. I just know you do something with brands. I'm like, we've been friends for 10 years. That's all. That's what you know about me.
Very weird. And I think it's weird to me because I'm a natural connector. So I'm like, oh, you do that? Oh, somebody just told me they need that. So let me connect such and such. So anyway, something else that you said that stuck out to me is just who will have creative control. And to me, that always goes back to ownership. You know what I'm saying? And being confident in knowing that because you're asking money from somebody does not mean you to control it. You know, that's the same thing with grant. I feel like I'd be going back and forth with a grant. Like, why you need to know that? You know, or you know, like you need to know that. Is that important? What does that have to do with the work? You know what I'm saying? Or the vision. And it's not saying I'm not grateful for the money, but it's just a clear, direct question of like, why are we bending over backwards just because you're giving me money? If it does not align, we cannot.
These grants are trying it. My friend was applying for a grant the other day. Well, for a grant and accelerated program. And they came back and they asked her, they were like, what other programs have you applied for? And have you been accepted into any of them?
Yeah. And they do that with this. They'd be like, who else have you applied for funding for? And it's like, okay. Well, right. I'm applying for funding from you.
Right. And then the next question was, well, what makes our program better than the other? I was like, you gonna keep filling this out or you gonna stop here?
That is crazy. But yeah, I really thank you. I appreciate you. And if you guys have any questions, I know a lot of you are texting me saying y'all gonna watch the playback. So drop the questions in the chat. I believe Anovia is in the group now, so she can definitely answer if she has the capacity to. But we're going to wrap this tonight at 7:30. Thank you, Anovia. And
yes, this was fun.
Next month, I think the topic is on technology. So I'm excited about that, how to use tech in the nonprofit. So until then, I bid you all adieu. Have a good night.